Okay, welcome to the second day of talking about researching all kinds of different sources. Today, our focus is two things. What is your barrier? And what are some alternatives if you can't find an article in Newsela or Common Lit? So this is the first worksheet you're going to work on today. It's your thesis statement building blocks. Each of these boxes you'll need to fill in based on your research so far. Just do the best you can. So I'm going to use the example today of those telephone operators from World War I. They're known as the Hello Girls. When? Well, 1918 is when the U.S. entered the war and when they first called for these telephone operators. What did they actually do? Well, they served as phone operators. They helped the U.S. Army stay connected and they helped win the war. I don't need a long answer here because this building block is what I'm going to use for my thesis statement, and I can't say too much. It's not an introductory paragraph. So why did they do it? I've read up a little bit on that, and I've learned that these women were really patriotic and they really did want to serve their country. And now this is the tricky part, is trying to think about what barrier was broken. Definitely the barrier was to equality and also the barrier of them not being able to serve in the military. Finally, the last box, why does this matter today? It matters because these women were not given the treatment they deserved, but also because now we know women can serve in all positions in the armed forces, and that makes a big difference. And we have to kind of honor what came before and how that happened. So the next step is to try out these 4 thesis statement sentence frames that I've created for you. Working through each one is going to help you to get closer to what your answer really is as far as what is your argument, and that will help to focus your research. So using the building blocks, try each thesis sentence stem. You can change the thesis to make it work for you. So for example, in 1918, the Hello Girls broke the gender barrier by supporting the U.S. Army on the battlefront of World War I as telephone operators. This matters today because their service was forgotten, but they eventually opened up opportunities for women to serve throughout the military. It's okay. It's not the best. As I start to fit my information into the sentence stems, you're going to realize today where there are holes in your research, and you're also going to figure out what it is you're really trying to prove in your project. So if I try sentence stem 3, it says, throughout U.S. history, women lived with the barrier of being prevented from serving in the military. In 1918, the Hello Girls took action and risked their lives in supporting the U.S. Army on the battlefront of World War I as telephone operators. Because this barrier broke, the Allied forces won World War I, and women won a small battle in the fight for equality. Today, women still fight for equal treatment in the military. All right, and finally, I've got a 4th version, and just notice that as I wrote all 4 of these, my barrier became clearer, and when I know what my barrier is, it's much easier to explain my context, because everything else that was happening in history is not always important. So it helps you to focus in and understand what it is I need you to share with your audience. So this one I changed to before World War I. The United States military built a barrier to prevent women from serving close to the battlefront in war. This barrier resulted in limited opportunities for women in the military. So it's a kind of a different barrier. The Hello Girls broke that barrier by risking their lives supporting the U.S. Army on the battlefront of World War I as telephone operators. This matters because women won a small battle in the fight for equality. Today, women are still fighting for equal treatment in the military. Okay, so that was the first step today. Next, I want to talk to you about what you can do if you can't find an article in Newsela or Common Lit. I have said to some of you already that you can look at reliable websites, but especially if you're having trouble with that and you're not sure what's reliable, I'd really like to encourage you to go to this website. It's the school library website. And 2 sources in particular that are going to be useful to us would be Encyclopedia Britannica. Sorry, no, not yet. We're going to talk about Grolier Encyclopedia and the SIRS Discoverer Index. So when I go to SIRS Discoverer, the username and password is Greendale and Panthers. You're going to look for your topic you can look specifically for exactly the topic that you have been searching all along if you're still looking for general information. So I can look for the Hello Girls and see what comes up. And there's actually one article on them right away. And I looked at this article and I found that it gave me some good general information. And the really cool thing about that, SIRS, is if I click on Cite, it's going to give me exactly the information I need from my sources, my bibliography. So you could copy this into a document. And in just a minute, we'll also talk about what information we need to put on the note card. So that's one example. I also found that this article, the second article that was linked on the side, Answering the Call, gave me some really good background as well about how the women got started, how they refused to give up, and they almost got court-martialed because the building they were in was burning down, but they refused to stop working. Really cool information. So that was a very useful site. And then when I went to Grolier, I already had a lot of articles that I'd found about the girls now. So at this point, I wanted to research women in war because I needed to build up my background. I knew that there was a barrier that had been created keeping women from serving on the battlefront. So this site is going to help me understand historically were women allowed to fight in the military. When I look at it, it's really focusing on World War II, the 1940s. This is going to be better used to justify my argument in impact. So what difference did the women make? I could also get some good background here about World War I. And so Grolier is going to get right to the important information because sometimes we can get overwhelmed with how much information there is. So it'll help me to establish a little bit of the context of what is happening in the war. Okay, so that is what we're doing. One last thing. Be sure you're recording your sources on your note cards as you go. Go Grolier and Search Discover, really useful. We have all of these note cards, and these are the sources I used today. So the important information is the title. And if you want to make a note of just kind of what sort of source it is, I did that in the bottom right corner. That's not essential. Something that might be helpful to you is to start to make a note to yourself that this is good context. This article was about the armed forces. And as I looked into it, it was maybe more about impact. So I might need to change that. But the article that was about the women's rights movement, what was happening other than the war, that was context. That would also be really helpful for build-up. Okay, so that is what you're going to focus on tomorrow. And we're going to talk about what is due. Focus on Thursday, and we'll talk about what's due